The air inside the courtroom was heavy. People whispered and laughed, waiting for the punishment to be announced. In the center stood David, a young human soldier who once fought for his people. Now he stood with chains on his hands, his face pale and his heart broken. The judge spoke loudly. "David, you are guilty of betraying your unit," David shouted back. "I did not betray anyone. I was loyal, I followed orders." But no one cared about his words. The crowd only wanted to see him suffer. They wanted a strange punishment, something cruel and unforgettable. A door opened at the side of the room. Guards dragged in a creature, chained, dirty, and smelling so terrible that people covered their noses. The creature was thin, with gray skin, large eyes, and ragged clothes. She looked like she had been beaten many times. Her head hung low, and she did not resist. This was not a human woman, this was an alien slave bought and sold for only $5. The judge smiled in a cruel way. "Your punishment, David, is simple," he said. "You will marry this alien slave, you will share your life with her, and you will carry this shame forever." The room exploded with laughter. Some people clapped their hands, others shouted insults. They called David a traitor, a fool, a man with no honor. And now they said he would be tied to a stinking alien forever. David felt his legs grow weak. He could not believe what was happening. Marriage to a slave. Marriage to an alien. This was worse than death. He looked at the alien and his stomach turned. She smelled rotten, her clothes were covered with dirt, and her face was filled with scars. How could they do this to him? The guards pushed David closer to her. They forced his hand to touch the chain around her wrist. The alien looked up at him for a second. Her eyes were dark and full of pain. Not anger, not hatred, but deep sadness. David froze, because for one small moment he saw something human in her eyes. But the crowd shouted louder, breaking that strange moment of silence. The ceremony was quick and cruel. There were no flowers, no joy, no family to bless the marriage. Just chains, laughter, and humiliation. The alien was declared his wife, and everyone cheered like it was a joke. David felt the world crashing down on him. His career was over, his honor destroyed, his future stolen, and now he had to walk out of the courtroom with this alien slave by his side. As they walked through the streets, people followed and mocked them. Children threw stones. Women spat on the ground. Men laughed in his face. $5. Someone shouted. "That's all your bride is worth." David clenched his fists, but he said nothing. The alien walked quietly beside him, her head still down. Every step made the smell stronger. Every breath made David's stomach twist. At last they reached a small broken house on the edge of the city. This was his new home. Once he had dreamed of living in a fine house with honor, medals, and respect. Now he was given a place of shame. The guards left them and locked the door from outside. David and the alien were trapped inside together. David sat on the old chair, covering his face with his hands. He wanted to scream, he wanted to cry, but he held it in. The alien stood silently. In the corner, she did not move, she did not speak. She only stared at the floor. David whispered, "Why me? Why this?" But no answer came. The alien made no sound, no complaint, only silence. Hours passed. The night grew colder. The alien finally sat down on the floor, curling her thin body like a child. David watched her from the chair. She seemed weak, broken, like a piece of trash thrown away by the world. Yet in her quietness there was something strange, something David could not explain. When the moonlight touched her face, her eyes glowed just a little. Not enough for others to see, but enough for David to notice. He shook his head, thinking it was his tired mind playing tricks. But deep inside, he felt uneasy. Maybe this alien was not what she seemed. Maybe his punishment was not only humiliation but also a hidden danger. As he closed his eyes to rest, he whispered again, "What have they done to me?" The night grew darker. The city outside was silent, but inside the small house, two lives had just been tied together. One was a broken soldier with nothing left. The other was a slave sold for $5, stinking, scarred, and unwanted. And, yet hidden in the silence, was a secret waiting to rise. A secret that would change everything. The morning after the punishment was quiet. David woke up on the hard chair, his back aching, his mouth dry. For a moment he thought it was a nightmare, but then the smell reached his nose. The alien slave was still there, sitting on the floor, her chains heavy and her head bowed. David stared at her, his heart filled with shame. He was a human soldier, once respected, once feared, now forced into a marriage that was a joke. His wife was a creature that people laughed at, a creature sold like rotten food in a market. He wanted to scream, he wanted to blame her, but she had done nothing. She was a victim too. The alien finally lifted her head. Her large eyes looked directly at him, silent and deep. David shivered, because in those eyes he saw no hate, only sorrow. It was like looking into a well with no bottom, endless sadness. She opened her mouth, but no words came out, only a small breath, weak and trembling. David frowned. "You can't even speak."
"Can you?"
The alien said nothing, only lowered her head again. Her silence made him uneasy. He thought she would curse him or cry or fight, but she did nothing. She was like a shadow, present but invisible. Hours passed in the broken house. David tried to eat some bread. The alien did not touch anything. She just sat in the corner as if she did not exist, but sometimes David noticed her eyes following him, quiet, watching. It made him uncomfortable. Why was she looking at him like that? At night, David lay down on the old bed. He could not sleep because of the smell. It filled the room, heavy and rotten. He covered his nose with his blanket, but the scent was stronger than cloth. He cursed under his breath. This is worse than prison. But then something strange happened. When he opened his eyes in the middle of the night, he saw her moving. She was on her knees, cleaning the floor with her hands. Her fingers were bleeding, but she kept working. David sat up. "Shocked, what are you doing?" he asked. She looked at him with fear, as if she had been caught stealing. She whispered one word in a voice soft and broken. "Clean." David froze, because it was the first time he heard her voice. It was weak, but there was no anger in it. No hatred, only a quiet need to do something useful. He stared as she continued to wipe the floor, her hands trembling, her breath heavy. It looked painful, yet she did not stop. The next morning, David found the room tidier. The smell was still there, but weaker. He blinked, surprised. Did she try to make the place better for him? He shook his head. No, impossible. She was just an alien slave. A thing, not a person, but deep inside the thought haunted him. What if she was more than what she seemed? Days passed, and David noticed more strange things. She fixed the broken window quietly. She left food for him when he slept, even though she ate nothing herself. When he coughed, she brought him water without a word. Every act was small, silent, but it was there. It was like she was serving him, protecting him, even though he never asked. David's mind was torn. Part of him wanted to hate her, to see her as nothing but punishment. But another part of him, a small part, began to wonder. Why was she doing this? Why did she not fight back? Why did she not hate him? One night, David could not sleep again. He sat by the window looking at the stars. The alien was curled up in the corner, her body shaking from cold. He wanted to ignore her, but something inside pushed him. He threw an old blanket in her direction. She looked up, shocked, her eyes wide. For a moment, her face changed, almost soft, almost thankful. Then she hid again, pulling the blanket tightly around her body. David sat back, confused. Why did he feel pity for her? Why did her silence feel heavier than words? He tried to push the thoughts away. This is not a wife, he told himself. This is punishment, this is shame. But deep in his heart, he could not erase the image of her eyes, sad, endless, yet hiding something behind them. When he closed his eyes, he saw them again. And when he opened his eyes, he sometimes thought he saw her glow faintly in the moonlight. Not bright, not strong, but enough to make his heart beat faster. He whispered to himself, "What are you really?" The alien said nothing, but in the quiet night, her shadow looked larger, stranger, as if she carried a secret that the world had forgotten. And David, against his will, felt the first spark of curiosity. The days after the forced marriage dragged on slowly. David lived inside the broken house with the alien slave, and every day felt like punishment. But something strange began to happen, something he could not explain. At first, David thought it was his imagination. The alien bride moved like a shadow, always silent, always careful. But when he woke in the morning, small changes filled the room. The floor was swept, the broken chair was fixed, the water jar was full. David never saw her do it, but the results were there, he asked himself. Is she trying to take care of this place for me? One evening, David came back from gathering food. He found the alien sitting near the wall holding pieces of a broken metal tool. Her long, thin fingers moved quickly, joining wires and parts together. David stared, shocked. That machine has been broken for months, he muttered. The alien looked up nervously, afraid she had done something wrong. Then she pushed the tool toward him with her trembling hands. It worked again, sparks of light flashing in the dark. David could not speak for a moment. This creature, this so-called worthless slave, had repaired what no one in the village could fix. He took the tool in his hand, his voice low. How do you know this? The alien only lowered her head, refusing to answer. Her silence made the mystery deeper. That night, David could not sleep. He kept hearing the faint sound of her movements, the sound of chains dragging softly on the floor. He opened his eyes, and there she was again. This time she was in the kitchen corner, arranging food carefully. She placed the best piece aside, covering it with cloth. She saved it, not for herself, but for him. David's chest tightened. Why would she go hungry? And give him more? On the third night, the strangest thing of all happened. David woke suddenly, his throat dry. The moonlight spilled into the room, silver and cold. And then he saw it, her body faintly glowing. It was not bright like fire, not sharp like lightning, but soft, like the light of stars hidden behind clouds. Her skin shimmered for only a few seconds before fading again. David sat up quickly, his heart racing. Did I really see that? He whispered. The alien turned her head slowly, her eyes catching the moonlight. For one heartbeat, they did not look weak. They looked powerful. But then she closed them again, hiding it. David pressed his hand to his chest, his mind torn. Maybe he was tired. Maybe it was only a trick of the light, but deep inside he knew it was real. Something inside her was not ordinary. The next morning, David followed her quietly. He pretended to sleep, but he watched. She moved to the water jar again, dipping, her hands inside. When her fingers touched the water, the surface glowed faintly. The smell that once filled the house grew weaker, replaced by something fresher. David almost gasped, but he held it in. She thought no one was watching. Later that day, children outside shouted insults again. They threw stones at the window, breaking the glass. David rushed to the window, anger in his eyes. But before he could step outside, the alien placed her hand gently on the wall. The glass pieces trembled, then slowly pulled together. The crack disappeared, as if nothing had happened. David stared in silence, unable to believe what he had seen. His punishment was turning into a riddle. Who was this creature? Why was she hiding such power? And why did she act weak and broken if she could do things no human could? That night, David finally spoke to her. His voice was hard, but inside he was afraid. What are you hiding? From me? He asked. The alien froze, her body stiff. Her lips opened, but no words came out. Instead, she turned away, covering herself with the blanket. David felt anger rise, but also confusion. She had saved him food, repaired tools, and healed the house. And still she stayed silent, as if her secret must never be spoken. David leaned against the wall, whispering to himself, "This is not just punishment. This is something else." He closed his eyes, but his mind would not rest. Images, Of her glowing skin, her repairing touch, her sad eyes haunted him. The shame of being tied to her was still heavy, but something new was growing. A fear, yes, but also a strange respect. She was not what people thought, and David was beginning to see the truth. In the quiet darkness, the alien opened her eyes again. She looked at David as he slept, her face hidden, her thoughts unknown. But in her glowing eyes, there was a secret too dangerous to reveal, a secret that could destroy them both, or set them free. The whispers of the village never stopped. Every day people laughed at David, pointing at him as he walked through the streets. They called him the man with the $5 wife. They spat on the ground when he passed. David kept his head down, but inside his anger burned. Yet in the broken house things were different. The alien slave, once silent and hopeless, kept surprising him. She cleaned, she repaired, she even healed small wounds with a strange touch. David pretended not to notice, but he did. Every day he felt the weight of curiosity pressing harder. One evening the guards came for an inspection. They knocked loudly, shouting his name. David opened the door with clenched fists. The guards smirked, pushing inside. Their eyes fell on the alien bride still sitting in the corner with her head low. "Does she still stink, soldier?" One of them laughed. "Or have you grown used to your prize?" David wanted to strike them, but he held back. The guards circled the room, kicking at broken furniture. One of them grabbed the alien's arm roughly, pulling her up. She gasped, her eyes flashing for a second with something sharp. David saw it just for a moment. Her eyes glowed faintly. The guard laughed, not noticing. "Still weak," he said, shoving her down again. When they finally left, David turned to her. His voice was low and serious. "You could have fought them, couldn't you?" The alien froze, her hands shaking, her lips trembled as if words wanted to escape. Finally, in a whisper, she answered, "Not safe." David's heart pounded. Not safe? What did that mean? He leaned closer, his eyes locked on hers. "Who are you?" he demanded. The alien looked away, covering her face with her chained hands. David grabbed her wrists gently but firmly, pulling them down. Her eyes met his again, and this time, he saw it clearly. Behind the sadness, behind the scars, there was power. That night, the truth began to reveal itself. The alien finally spoke more, her voice weak but steady. "I am not slave, not born for chains," she whispered. David stared at her, confused. "What do you mean?" She took a deep breath, as if the words were heavy. "My people. We were hunted, captured, sold, hidden, with smell so no one sees real." David's eyes widened. "The smell," he muttered. "It's a disguise?" She nodded slowly. "Yes, a shield. A curse to hide, to survive." Her shoulders shook as she continued. "They tell story that we are weak, dirty, worthless, so humans believe, but truth is different." David felt his blood run cold. So, all this time, the stench, the shame, the humiliation. It was a mask. Her people had been powerful, maybe even dangerous, and someone had turned them into slaves worth only a few coins. He leaned back, shaking his head. This changes everything." The alien lowered her gaze again. "They kill anyone who shows power," she whispered. "That is why I stay quiet. That is why I hide." Her hands touched the chain around her neck. "This iron is not only to bind body, it is to silence soul." David's chest tightened. He had hated her for being weak, for being silent. But now he saw the truth. She had been carrying a secret heavier than his punishment. He whispered, almost to himself, "You're not my shame. You're their fear." The next day, David walked into the village with new eyes. He noticed things he had ignored before. Other alien slaves with the same smell, the same silence, all hiding something, all broken in the same way. Were they too carrying this hidden strength? The thought shook him deeply. That night, as he sat by the window, David asked her again, What is your name?" The alien hesitated, her lips trembling. Finally, she whispered, "Lyra." The sound of her name filled the room with strange warmth. David repeated it softly, "Lyra," but peace did not last. 2 nights later, the guards returned. This time their mood was darker. Rumors had reached them that one of the alien slaves was not as weak as she should be. They entered the house. Without knocking, their boots stomping on the floor, David stood up, his fist ready. "What do you want now?" he demanded. The leader of the guards sneered. "We've heard whispers," he said. "Your $5 bride may not be what she seems." David's heart jumped. They were close to the truth. He looked at Lyra, who sat still in the corner, her head bowed, but he saw her hands trembling, her eyes glowing faintly in fear. The guard stepped closer, reaching for her. David felt a surge of anger he could not control. "No," he growled, standing between them and her. The guards laughed, shoving him aside. But in that moment, something happened. Lyra raised her hand slightly and the air in the room shifted. The lamps flickered. The walls shook softly. The guards paused, confused. David's eyes widened, realizing her secret was about to be revealed. The air inside the house was heavy after the guards left. David sat near the broken window, his fists clenched, his heart still pounding. He had seen it with his own eyes, the flicker of power inside Lyra, the alien bride. The walls had trembled, the lamps had shivered, and for one moment the truth had almost spilled into the open. Lyra sat in the corner, her chains heavy, her face pale. Her body shook as if she had fought a storm inside her own chest. David looked at her, his anger mixed with fear. "You cannot keep hiding," he whispered. "They will come back. They know something is different about you." But Lyra only shook her head. "Not yet," she whispered softly. "If they see, they kill us both." Her eyes were full of sadness, but also a strange strength. She was not afraid for herself, but for him. For 2 nights they waited in silence. David could barely sleep, knowing the guards might return at any moment. He watched Lyra closely, and the more he looked, the less she seemed like a slave. Her movements were careful, her silence heavy with secrets, and every time her eyes glowed faintly in the dark, his chest grew tighter. On the 3rd night, the storm arrived. The sound of boots echoed through, the empty streets louder than before. Voices shouted orders, iron clashed against iron. David stood quickly, his breath sharp. "They are coming," he muttered. The door was kicked open with a crash. This time, not 2 guards, but 6 stormed. Inside, their weapons shining under torchlight. The leader pointed at Lyra, his voice cold and cruel. "Take her. The council wants proof. This slave is not what she pretends to be." David stepped forward, blocking their path. "You will not take her," he growled. The guards laughed, their eyes filled with hatred. "Move, soldier," one of them spat. "You are nothing now, no honor, no rank, only a man chained to dirt." But David did not move. His body shook with rage, his fists clenched tighter than ever before. "This is my wife," he said, his voice steady. "You will not touch her." The guards pushed him aside, their hands reaching for Lyra. She raised her head slowly, her dark eyes meeting theirs. And then it happened. The ground trembled. The chains around her wrists rattled like angry snakes. A sudden wave of force pushed the guards back, throwing them against the walls. Their torches fell, fire spilling across the floor. David's eyes widened in shock. Her secret was no longer hidden. Lyra stood in the center of the room, her body glowing faintly, her scars fading under the light. The smell that once filled the house was gone. In its place was something sharp and clean, like the air after lightning. The guards scrambled to their feet, fear on their faces. "What is she?" One shouted. "Monster!" Another cried, but David stepped beside her, his voice louder than their fear. "She is not a monster," he shouted. "She is my wife." The guards charged again, their swords raised. Lyra lifted her chained hands, and the metal broke with a sharp crack. She moved with speed that no human could follow. The fire bent away from her touch. The weapons shook in the guards' hands. and with a single push of energy they were thrown outside into the street. The people of the village rushed out of their homes. They saw the guards lying on the ground, and in the doorway, the glowing alien bride. Whispers filled the air, fear mixing with awe. "She is one of them," someone cried. "The hidden ones," another whispered. David pulled Lyra back inside quickly, closing the broken door. His heart raced, his voice urgent. "They know now. They will send more, stronger than these." Lyra stood silently. Her hands trembling from the power she had released, she whispered softly, "They will not stop. They will hunt us. They will destroy you for protecting me." David looked at her, his jaw set. "Then let them come," he said. "I will not give you to them." For the first time, Lyra's face softened. Her lips curved into the smallest fragile smile. Her voice was low, almost a breath. "You should hate me," she whispered. "But you protect me." David felt something stir in his chest, something he had not felt since before the punishment. Hope. He took her hand gently, the glow still warm against his skin. "They punished me with you," he said. "But maybe they gave me more than they knew." Outside, the village was restless. The council would not forgive what had happened. They would send soldiers, machines, hunters. This was no longer a punishment. This was war. David and Lyra stood together in the broken house. One was a soldier cast aside. The other was a slave with hidden power. But together they had become something new. And for the first time, David did not feel shame. He felt ready, because enemies had arrived, and soon the whole world would know the truth. The night after the fight with the guards was long and heavy. The village whispered in fear, doors shut tight, windows locked. Everyone had seen the alien bride break her chains and glow with strange power. No one would forget it, and the council would not forgive it. David sat by the door with an old weapon in his hands. His body was tired, but his mind was sharp. He knew more soldiers would come, not just guards, but hunters trained to capture and kill. Beside him sat Lyra, silent as always, her glowing eyes watching the flames of a dying candle. "You cannot stay here," David said firmly. "They will burn this house. They will burn this whole village if they must." Lyra lowered her head, her voice soft. "If we run, they follow. If we stay, they kill." David clenched his fists, his anger rising. "Then we do not stay, and we do not let them take you." At midnight, the first sign came. The ground shook with the steps of heavy machines. Distant horns echoed, calling soldiers into the streets. David grabbed a small bag and threw it over his shoulder. "Come with me," he said, his voice sharp. Lyra hesitated, her eyes shining, but then she rose to her feet. Together they slipped into the shadows. The streets were filled with soldiers, their armor reflecting torchlight. David led Lyra through narrow alleys, past broken fences and empty stables. Every corner was dangerous. Every sound made his heart race. But Lyra moved quietly, her steps light, her presence almost invisible. It was as if the shadows themselves hid her. When a patrol turned the corner, David froze. The soldiers raised their lanterns, searching the darkness. Lyra touched David's arm gently, her eyes glowing faintly. The light from the lanterns flickered, dimmed, then went out. The soldiers, cursed in confusion, stumbling in the dark. David pulled her forward quickly, his breath sharp. "What did you do?" he whispered. Lyra shook her head. "Only a little." They reached the edge of the village where the forest began. But the sound of engines roared behind them. Machines with metal wheels and sharp lights rolled into the trees. David pushed. "Lyra ahead, run," he shouted. The forest swallowed them, branches whipping against their faces, but the hunters were fast, their machines crushing everything in their path. At a small clearing, David turned, raising his weapon. The hunters were close now, their torches burning bright. "Go," he shouted to Lyra. "I will hold them off." But she did not move. Her eyes glowed brighter, her chains breaking apart, fully falling to the ground. "No," she said firmly. "Not without you." The hunters charged, shouting, their weapons raised. Lyra lifted her hands, and the forest responded. The trees bent, the wind roared, the ground shook under their feet. The hunters stumbled, their machines toppled, flames bursting from broken engines. David stared in shock. his heart pounding. This was no weak slave. This was something powerful, something terrifying, and yet she used it to protect him. They ran deeper into the forest, leaving the wreckage behind. David's legs burned, his lungs ached, but he did not stop. Lyra moved beside him, her glow faint in the darkness. For the first time, David felt the bond between them grow, not chains, not punishment, but something stronger. Trust. At dawn, they reached the old tunnels under the mountains. These tunnels were once used by miners, now forgotten and abandoned. David pushed open, a rusted gate leading her inside. The air was cold, damp, heavy with dust, but it was safe. At least for the moment inside the tunnels they rested. David leaned against the wall, his face pale, his voice low. "You saved me," he whispered. Lyra sat across from him, her hands glowing faintly as she healed a cut on his arm. "You protect me," she replied softly. "So I protect you." David's eyes met hers, and for a moment the silence was heavy with something unspoken. He had hated this punishment, hated her presence, hated the shame. But now, in the darkness of the tunnels, she was no longer his punishment. She was his ally, his partner, maybe even more. Outside, the world was changing. The council would not stop. They would send more soldiers, more machines. David knew this was only the beginning. But deep inside, he no longer felt broken. He no longer felt ashamed. He felt ready to fight. As they sat in the tunnel, Lyra's voice broke the silence. "Do you still hate me?" she asked, her words trembling. David looked at her, his chest heavy. He shook his head slowly. "No," he whispered. "I don't hate you." Her eyes glowed softly in the dark, and for the first time, a smile touched her face. It was small, fragile, but real. In that moment, David knew this was no punishment. This was the beginning of something greater, something worth fighting for. The tunnel stretched deep under the mountains. David and Lyra walked in silence, their footsteps echoing softly. The world above was hunting them. The council wanted them dead. But down here, in the quiet dark, there was no laughter, no chains, no mockery, only the sound of two people who had lost everything but found each other. David carried the small bag of food, but every time he tried to share, Lyra pushed it back. "You eat," she whispered. "I need less." David frowned, shaking his head. "No, not anymore. We share everything." For the first time since their punishment began, Lyra nodded and took a small piece. It was not much, but it felt like trust. Days passed inside the tunnels. David told her stories of his childhood, of the wars he had fought, of the betrayal that led to his punishment. Lyra listened, her glowing eyes soft, her silence no longer empty but full of meaning. Then one night, she spoke of her own people. "We were not weak," she said, her voice trembling. "We were builders, healers, protectors. We lived with the stars, but humans feared us, so they chained us. They spread lies. They sold us for coins. They made the world laugh at us." David clenched his fists, his anger burning. "All this time, they made me believe you were worthless," he muttered. Lyra shook her head gently. "Worth is not given. It is lived," she whispered. Her words stayed in his heart, like a flame in the darkness. The council soldiers did not stop searching. David and Lyra could hear the echoes of machines far above, but in the tunnels something new was happening. Lyra grew stronger, her powers returning little by little. She healed David's wounds. She lit their path with faint glowing light. And slowly, the shame that once filled David's heart turned into pride. One evening, after days of running, they reached the end of the tunnels. The mountains opened into a wide valley, green and untouched. The air was fresh, the sky wide, the sun bright after endless nights of fear. David stood still, his chest rising and falling. "This," he whispered, "this is freedom." Lyra stepped beside him, her chains gone, her scars fading, her face calm. Her eyes glowed gently as she looked at the horizon. No chains, she whispered, no masters. But their peace did not last. Behind them came the sound of drums, shouts, and engines. The council had found them, soldiers marching into the Yair Valley, weapons ready. David's heart pounded, his hand gripping the old weapon tightly. He turned to Lyra, his voice hard. Go, I'll fight them. But she shook her head, her hand touching his. Not alone, she said firmly. We fight together. The soldiers poured into the valley, shouting, their armor shining under the sun. David and Lyra stood side by side, 2 against many. But when the soldiers charged, the ground itself responded. Lyra lifted her hands and the earth shook. The air lit up with a storm of light, bending and twisting at her command. David fought fiercely, his blade striking, his body moving with new strength. Together they pushed back the hunters, their unity stronger than any army. The soldiers shouted in fear. Monster, some cried witch, others screamed, but David's voice cut through their panic. She is not a monster, he roared. She is my wife, and she is worth more than all of you. The battle raged, but slowly the soldiers broke. Their machines failed. Their courage crumbled. One by one they retreated, leaving the valley behind. David stood breathing hard, sweat on his face, blood on his hands. Beside him, Lyra glowed faintly, her body trembling from the power she had used, but her eyes were steady, fixed on him. Silence fell over the valley. The war was not over, the council would come again, but in that moment, they had won. David dropped his weapon, his chest heavy, his heart full. He looked at Lyra, and, for the first time, he saw not a punishment, not a slave, but a partner. He whispered softly. They thought they ruined me, but they gave me the greatest gift. Lyra tilted her head, her lips curving into a soft smile. Her voice was gentle, almost like music. You were punished with me, she said. But I was saved with you. David took her hand, his voice steady. They bought you for $5, he whispered. But to me, you are priceless. In the valley, under the open sky, they stood together. The soldier with no honor, and the alien, slave with hidden power. What began as shame turned into strength. What began as punishment turned into love. And though the world above still hunted them, in their hearts they were already free. For the first time since his chains, David smiled. And for the first time since her capture, Lyra laughed softly. They were not broken anymore. They were not victims anymore. They were together, and they were happier than ever.